Hello, everybody, and indeed, welcome to the 2020 BrightTALK Benchmarks Report webinar. My name is David Pitta. I'm the CMO at BrightTALK, and I'm delighted to be presenting this talk today with my co-host, if you will, and I'll introduce him in 1 minute. This is the 10th annual BrightTALK Benchmark Report, so it's certainly a milestone, and I was reflecting this morning on the first one that I had been involved in 2009, and it was in a very tiny, small room out of San Francisco. And although now I'm in my home office just outside of Phoenix, Arizona, some things have not changed, but many things have. I was reflecting and looking back at the abstract of the data that we shared 10 years ago, and it was talking about analyzing 1,500 talks and 100,000 B2B professionals. Fast forward to today, we will be looking at an audience of over 10 million professionals, 35,000 talks, 218 million minutes of engagement across the platform. And I'm just thrilled to be able to share the data points that we are going to review today. What's also changed is I am not alone today, as I was 10 years ago, giving this data. With me, I have NicholasMarkwith. Good morning, Nick.
Good morning, David.
Nick is our head of communities. He's been with us. Later this year, it will be 9 years. He has really been instrumental. Like many people, BrightTALK finds good talent right out of school. He was early on in the business, and he's kind of been through many parts and really helped shape how we look at acquiring, engaging, retaining our audience. So he's the head of communities at BrightTALK. I'm delighted to have him, and whenever I think I know everything about acquiring and engaging professionals, there's certainly, I can just book a meeting with Nick and I always learn something. So Nick, thank you for joining us. Maybe you can share with the audience what you do in your role today here at BrightTALK.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm excited to be here today. Thank you, David. So like David said, I've been here for about 8 years. I work with our audience as well as our clients and help our clients create content that resonates and attracts their target audiences. So I spend a good amount of time working with our clients to ensure that, one, they're following best practices that we see work well, leveraging the data insights that we have to share, and using those best practices to really get the most out of the content they're creating. In addition, working with how we grow our audience and really develop our communities on BrightTALK so that our clients are accessing a really engaged audience that is continually growing year after year.
Thanks, Nick. So I just want to point out, we are all in different scenarios than normal. I am not in a soundproof room studio of any means. I am in my home office. I understand Nick was telling me the audio was a little bit echoey. I'm doing my best to try and trap the voice. Nick is actually out of San Francisco, also in a conference room. So we'll do our best. Please bear with us as we're trying to maintain the best quality experience for you today. So we're going to get into the data points, but I do want to set up, there's a few housekeeping items, of course. Please feel free to ask questions. There's an ask question box below us. There's also an attachments tab there. We put a lot of attachments in today's talk. So you'll find certainly the opportunity to talk with anybody at BrightTALK if you want to do that at any point via our live chat functionality. There's a link for that. You can connect with myself or Nick on LinkedIn. We put some links there as well. You can learn more about Nick's career journey here at BrightTALK. I've put a PDF copy of these slides there. There's a lot of data points on there, and I'll explain. There's going to be more data points coming, but those slides are available for you should you want those. And we also have a very popular series. With COVID-19, we've started a series. We've done 5. We're going into our 6th talk about how to flip the switch during these times. And so that series has been incredibly popular. Over 11,000 people in the last 5 weeks have viewed content across that series. So we wanted to invite you to go and view that. And then also we have a live transcription for those that would like to read while we're talking. So anyway, the benchmarks is certainly one of our pillar programs that we run every year. Some of the things that we've learned over the years is that some of the platform data does not shift as often or doesn't have any dramatic shifts. Some engagement points can be very specific or kind of very consistent year over year. So as we've evolved this report, we want to make sure that we're getting you the best data points to help and shape your marketing strategies and how you engage your audiences. So we've started to pull out some of those things that don't shift very often year to year, and we will be putting those in the guide that we produce following this talk. We always kind of start with the talk. So this talk will be a combination of analyzing data points across the BrightTALK platform, as well as we've been incorporating user survey data that Nick and his team have been collecting. And so this last survey was really on the content preferences and formats of B2B professionals. It went out to about 100, a small subset of our audience, about 100,000 professionals a few months ago. I think, Nick, it was about 2,400 responses. And so we've looked at that data, analyzed it, and you're going to see, and we're going to use kind of color coding tags as we work through it to show you which data points are going to be representative of the platform, the BrightTALK network, and which of those are going to be from the audience survey. And we will weave that story through as we go. So, did I miss anything, Nick?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, and also for the audience, I'm going to be moving back and forth between sharing slides as well as sharing or going back to the video so that we can talk through it. But the first thing I'll do is I'll just share really how we broke up these data points. So they're going to be in 3 different sections. So we're going to think about content from the terms of how do you plan your strategy? What are the preferences of the audience, and how should you look at your editorial plans? And I got to tell you, Nick is an expert at this. He consults a lot of our clients on their editorial strategies. So this will be a great section for us to dig into. And then we will go into distribution. So how can you best distribute that content and get the best and acquire your ideal audience to engage in that content? And then we'll measure some of the performance around the analytics as for how you can grow, adapt, and optimize your strategy. Okay. So Nick, this is the methodology. As you know, I kind of buried the lead at the start of this, but we did analyze 10 million users on the platform. We looked at about 35,000 talks, 218 million minutes. We also looked at sending quite a few emails and what the impact of that was. On the user survey, as I've mentioned, it sent to 100,000 users. We've got 2,400 responses from that. 67% of those users are part of the company's buying committee at some level. So that allowed us to understand a little bit about the purchase behaviors that are going on. And then of the user surveys, 58% had 15 years of experience. So definitely an experienced group of B2B professionals. So with that, Nick, I'm going to really lean on you. You are the expert, and we're going to start with talking through the planning and specifically around understanding the audience with this user survey. So I'll just turn it over to you, and you can share the data for us.
Yeah, no problem. So really, when you start with content planning, you need to really think about, obviously you need to think about your audience, but really you need to understand why are they coming to view content and what are their motivations? And so part of our user survey that we ask every year is what is the motivation that why are you going to view content? Why are you researching and spending more than 2 hours a week to research? And so what we found is that it really comes to, and this hasn't really changed year over year, but it comes down to it, our audience is looking to keep up to date what's going on in their industry. Keep it up, knowing what you need to know and what new technologies are coming out is so crucial to maintaining not only your professional growth, but also maintaining business excellence. That it's not surprising every year, this is the top motivation. But in addition to that, everything else, goes back to, creating quality work, to improve, you're learning and growing in order to continue the quality work that you're creating, discover new things, acquire new bodies and skills. There's both a business reason and a professional reason when you are learning and growing. And so, whenever you're starting to create and plan content, it's crucial that you remember that these professionals are, yes, they are, obviously they often work in these organizations that you're selling to, but they're also humans. And so you need to think about them from a professional level, but also at a human level as well. And so creating content that ties into these reasons, and how that translates the format, topics you cover, and how you cover them is so crucial that you need to really uncover why they're coming to view your content. And so we think this data really shows us that, the data, why people are coming, doesn't really change regardless of what type of professional you are. And so knowing that you should match your content strategy that aligns with these types of motivations. And so, because what we're finding is that our professionals are spending hours and hours viewing this content. They're spending 2 hours, at least 62% of our professionals are doing 2 hours or more a week, on learning and growing and professional development. So it's really crucial that not only are you, creating content that resonates with them, but you're also taking advantage of the fact that there's a crucial amount of time that you can gain share voice and mind share with these professionals. And it's up to you to be creating content that taps into that.
Yeah, when I look at this, Nick, I see those top 5, and I think, the reason why I would spend time researching content or even in professional development, really it's almost like that equal sign on to innovate or to solve problems. So yeah, this was very encouraging. There is a question coming through on how we got at the user survey data, Nick. Was it the sample size of 2,400? How did we select that? Was it just everyone who responded, or did we make any specific criteria around job title, role, or function?
Yeah, so it's a great question. So we looked at our 100,000 professional user sample came from a combination of different regions. So we matched our regional data, our regional splits. So typically speaking, we see about 35% of our audience come from North America, about 30% of our audience come from EMEA, and then about another 20% or so come from APAC. And so we try to match those ratios. But in addition to that, the biggest criteria was that a user had viewed content within the past 12 months. And so we randomly selected them based off the region percentage so that we can ensure that we're having a representative sample of our audience on BrightTALK.
That's great. And of the data point on the left, where it's 62% of professionals spend 2 or more hours per week on professional development, that was a question in the survey? Is that
yes,
right?
It was. So this slide has 2 different questions that we asked. It has, what is your motivation for why you are learning and growing? But also, how long are you spending on a per week basis on content to learn and grow? And so this is kind of looking at both figures combined.
Okay, excellent. Well, we've got about 25 more data points. I'm going to move us through to the next section and let you take that, okay, Nick?
Sounds great. So in addition to why they're coming to view content, we wanted to understand what type of content and formats really resonate with our audiences. Now, take this with a grain of salt. We did ask users from a webinar platform. So it's not surprising to see that webinars are a key usage by our audience. But it was interesting to see that, these other formats really, that really came down to being video-based and online-based. So looking at webinars, online courses, and short videos, these are the top tactics in which our professionals are using to continue their learning and growing. And so it's really crucial to as you're thinking about the content strategy, the type of content you're creating, thinking about, what are the tactics that are really resonating with your audience, and why how much you should spending your time creating this type of content. And so what we have found is that, webinars and digital, really rich media content is their preferred format. And so as you focus on your content strategy, you should really be considering how can you plan around this content, and then, as we'll talk about a little bit later, transform that content into different formats.
Okay. And I just want to point out that it may be on the nose or not that, a webinar and video platform vendor is showcasing that professionals value video-based learning as a preferred format. We understand that, and we're not trying to be self-serving. It's probably natural that the audience, Nick, that we surveyed, that were engaging in using video-based formats like webinars and videos would respond in this way. So that's, so it's a little bit slanted there, but I mean, you can see all the different types of formats coming through in the survey results as well. I think for a lot of people like myself, either you're one learner or the other. Typically, you don't. Well, maybe you kind of dabble in both different formats, but we do find the BrightTALK professional audiences do dip into kind of rich media formats more than text-based formats. There is a question around if we further segment the report by industry type. And we do. I got to tell you, hats off. The marketing team at BrightTALK has been just running incredibly, and I'll just stop sharing for just a second because I just want to hit the point here. They've been working incredibly hard since the outbreak of COVID-19 as a platform that is part of the solution in bringing professionals together during this time, they have had to double and even triple a lot of their workload. And then in the middle of it, they've got to do what is arguably the biggest lift of the year for us, which is analyzing all this data and building out this report. So again, we deliver this talk first, and then we will follow on in the coming weeks with different versions of these benchmark reports. And we typically do, unfortunately, have to segment it out by many different industries. So you'll see those reports coming, and we will definitely get you guys access to that data as we go. Nick, I'm going to do my best to manage time, but there's a lot of questions coming in. So did we do any age range at all on the professionals that we surveyed, or could you draw any conclusions to really kind of the average age range across BrightTALK and as a representative of the survey?
Yeah, so we didn't look at age range, but we did look at the job level of the professionals. So we do track basically our audience's staff. Are they more manager, are they directors, VP, C-level executives, right? And so what we were looking to do is make sure our sample is representative of what we see on BrightTALK. But we did ask, what is your seniority level? How many years have you been in your industry? And what we had found that on BrightTALK and those that we surveyed, more than half of our audience has at least 15 years of experience. So what we have found is actually our audience is very, very well deep into their career. They spend a lot of time, researching and being in charge of a lot of organizations, teams, et cetera. And so of the 100,000 that we surveyed, we want to make sure it's representative, but we found that a lot of them are very tenured. And that's what we found.
Got it. And somebody's just asking to remind them of the respondents. Nick had just mentioned 100,000 surveyed, 2,400 responses were analyzed in this BrightTALK user survey data. There's also a question, or there's a comment about doing a snap survey around how valuable, how this data may have changed since COVID-19. It's a great idea, and I'm certain Nick's going through a series where they are going to do quarterly surveys of the audience around different themes. So maybe that will be part of the next theme and the next survey, and we will invite all of you to come and see that data. All right, questions are flying in, Nick. So I'm going to go back to just kind of sharing the presentation and read some of those questions so that I can kind of pepper them in as we go. So talk a little bit about the first platform benchmark around content formats.
Yeah, so we started looking at now our platform data. And so within the platform, you can create a variety of different types of content in different formats, whether it's video, whether it's webinar, or virtual events. And so what we looked at was just the volume of content being created across these different formats and just the overall volume of content across the board. And what you've seen here is that, over the years, we've seen a trend of people moving to online and leveraging, rich media content to drive engagement with their audience. And so that has been pretty steady throughout the past 3 to 4 years. Now, what we have seen literally as of, 30 to 45 days ago, things are changing. There have been a massive shift to online. As we see COVID and everything impact, obviously everything right now, it's important for us to know at the bottom right that we've seen a double the amount of content created in March as we did in February, and we're expected to see about 3,000 pieces of content being created. This is a dramatic increase of content we're seeing, and this is the same behavior we're seeing with our audience. Not only are we seeing marketers create more content, which is not surprising during these times, what we're also seeing is our users coming and viewing more. Over 200% increased month over month, as we've seen from March to April. And so we're really seeing a lot of engagement on BrightTALK as COVID impacts physical events and physical strategies, and shifting that strategy from physical to online.
Yeah. So just to reinforce, because there's a lot of stuff coming through about, well, is this pre-pandemic, post-pandemic? Let's survey the audience now, see how it shifts. We get it. All of this data that we're going to, with the exception of this data point right here in particular, where we did want to just address the 200 to 300% increase in new users, new content, engagement. This is the only COVID data point that we pulled. What we're looking at will be pre-COVID data sets, both on the user and on the platform.
I also want to make a quick note, David. I see one other question coming in. All of this content is free for users to view. So, we don't charge any of our users to access this content. All you need to do is sign up for BrightTALK, and you have full access to all of our 125,000 pieces of content on BrightTALK. And so all of this is free for our users. Just to answer that question.
Yeah. Yeah. So the second half of the question was, what is the willingness of the general audience to pay for these things? It's not, again, because we're all the content on BrightTALK is free. We're probably not best to answer that particular question. I do know that people do pay for virtual sessions, and even more so nowadays. There's another question, Nick, around have we found audience college students in school or newly graduated? Are they migrating to these types of formats? I don't know if I know that particular answer. I'm not sure if you do either.
So we have I'd say about roughly 4 to 5% of our audience are students, or kind of self-qualify themselves as students. And so based off that, we haven't necessarily seen more engagement, but we do see students using our platform. It is something that we are looking into more, especially as we see a shift of behavior from pretty much all segments of the population moving to online. It's something of consideration, but we do find a lot of students viewing content pretty regularly, especially more graduate students who need a little bit more research and more access to experts and professionals.
Yeah, certainly. I know when I'm interviewing young talent, we've got sales development roles where they're right out of school, and I'm always asking them, what's your use of webinars and videos as you were going through school? And it varies quite dramatically. Sometimes it's very light. Sometimes people are very familiar and they've attended many of them. But when they're kind of looking at BrightTALK, they get excited about it. They see the value in the professional development and the ease of access and accessibility of the free content. Talk a little bit about the virtual events. So this is something you've been involved in, these online summits with BrightTALK over kind of 8 years. You just give us the data points that you ran around that.
Yeah, so BrightTALK runs virtual events every year. We run about 100 or so every year since 2008. And so, we've been running these pretty often. We're seeing more and more of our customers and clients turning to virtual events, obviously with physical events not being able to happen right now. But what we found is a few different things. Of the 100 events that we ran in 2019, what we found is on average, we usually see events to be about 2.5 days online. We see about 7 or so content pieces being created within these pieces of content. So typically what we'll see is anything from 8 a.m. Pacific time all the way to about 1 or 2 p.m. Pacific time, and have a long day of sessions for attendees to attend. And then, we're seeing about 1,300 people, attend these on average. What I think is really interesting though, and why virtual events are, I think, particularly interesting to any marketer who's trying to leverage their existing content, or to tap into new audiences, is that what we found is that we found out attendees view content almost double the amount of content and view when it's organized in a virtual event than when it's not. And so, what we found is that there's a really great opportunity for you to take existing content that you already have, repackage it into a virtual event to get more out of that content and extend the shelf life of that content. And so, this really is an interesting opportunity. For us in the events that we run, they aren't paid; they're free. So it's a slightly different model than some organizations out there. But we're finding, a lot of our audience is flocking to these events because it's highly accessible and very easy to put on with a fraction of the work of a physical event.
Yeah. And there's a question just like, what does this represent? Is this number of virtual events or video-based content created? And I just think this is a terminology piece, Nick, where it's, when we're referencing a virtual event or an online summit, it's a collection of talks put together around a theme or tracks, one or multiple days. And it's through that collection of virtual events where you can get kind of more scale out of that particular effort. There's also a question around how the respondent audience breaks out by language. So, I mean, my gut, Nick, and you may have a better answer here, but is, primarily BrightTALK delivers within English-speaking countries. The content on BrightTALK is almost entirely English-speaking. So I don't know if you've got any additional information around how this is broken out by language, or would you agree with that?
Yeah, so I mean, most of the content on BrightTALK is based in English. I don't know if we necessarily see a different trend. I will say though that we're seeing this trend across all regions across the world. So we're not seeing it just in North America or Western Europe. We're seeing in Eastern Europe, APAC, Latin America, Africa. All of our numbers are showing an increase across the board. So it's hard to say whether the language itself would make an impact just because of our data is mostly English. But in terms of kind of a global impact, we're seeing this across the board.
Yeah, yeah. And we've got local language players, so our technology can be used for other languages, but just predominantly the most of the material is English-based speaking. So it'd be hard to draw a lot of strong conclusions of other languages, even with other languages speaking on the platform. Let's move into cadence, Nick, and let's talk a little bit about what you found out around the viewing habits of the user survey.
Yeah, so we also, part of our user survey, we asked the audience, how frequently are you viewing content? How is it monthly? Is it every other week, daily, etc.? And so what we found is an overwhelming amount of our audience is viewing content on a monthly basis. Now, this aligns for the most part to how most of our clients are creating content, but there is a segment of our audience that are highly engaged in viewing content more frequently. And so there's an opportunity for our audience, for our clients to tap into that existing behavior and ensure that you are engaging your audience and building that share of voice while you are creating content on a specific cadence. And so, one of the ways you can do that is through virtual events, through existing content. Another way, which we've listed here, is reorganize your content into series. So something that we have been doing more and more, and actually something that I'm developing our original series with BrightTALK. And what we're finding is that our audiences want to keep coming back and back over and over and over again. They want, if they find a series, just like with a podcast, if they find a series that they really like, with high quality content, interesting speakers, interesting data points, original and fresh, they'll come back over and over and over again. There's a huge amount of interest on our platform for the series-based content, and there's an opportunity for marketers to tap into that. And so, things that they want to learn more about it's very much aligned with what we see across BrightTALK. It's on actionable content, so best practices, tips and tricks. They want to understand what's happening in their industry, where things are shifting, and what trends they need to be aware of, and just discussions on what the future of their industries are. And so there's a really nice opportunity here to diversify the type of content you're creating, not only in terms of the format, in terms of whether it's a webinar, whether it's a talk like this, video-based, but also to repackage the type of content so that it's encouraging the right behavior of a reoccurring audience.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying the series-based content that the marketing team here at BrightTALK is doing. We're having incredible success with it. And it's a very different mindset than last year, where it was like, okay, we just want to produce this many pieces of content every month, to we want to produce this much content within this series, this quarter. It's a different mindset. When you can build equity in a series, you get momentum both externally with your audience, as well as you get momentum internally with your team, who will then reference the series, and you can definitely run a thread through a series and produce many of them. There's a piece of content in the BrightTALK Academy of which you're viewing this talk today. It's called Perpetual Demand Creation. I would encourage you to go watch that. Olivia Dassler and myself kind of lay out how we look at series-based content. It's a really good piece to reinforce this particular point. There's tons of questions coming in, Nick. I just want to let the audience know I'm seeing them. Many of these, we will get to these data points as we go, and if we don't, I will bring them back through, but I just want to keep us on track here, so we're going to keep moving along. Nick, talk about some of the consistencies across the user survey and the platform, and really what the professional audience was looking for.
Yeah, so we started looking at how does content formats and preferences differ across job levels. So, depending on whether you're a practitioner, a manager, a C-level executive, how much time are you spending engaged with content? What content do you prefer, and why do you prefer it? And so what we found is, not surprising, is that an overwhelming amount of our audience slash pretty much everyone across the board is looking for actionable content. They want content that will help them make decisions, that will help them, like I said, do their job better or improve their business operations. And so, not surprising that we see that practitioners, for example, like more, entry level, practitioners can be seniority level across the board, but they tend to be, earlier in their career. So it's not surprising they're looking for, quick tips and tricks, what they need to understand with industry predictions, and just overview of technical topics. As you get, higher level executives, a lot of this is the same. They still want to learn best practices, what they need to keep up to date on industry trends. But what we are starting to find is differentiation of how much time they're spending on content. And so, I think it's really interesting as we start exploring this, and we'll go over this in more depth in the report itself. There's a lot of interesting aspects to how, the WOW content you're creating, what type of content you're creating, how long these professionals are spending on each piece of content, and really optimizing what content you're type of creating to map what the audiences really care about. And so, we go deeper into this a little bit more in our report. But we're seeing that webinars and videos tend to be the most engaged, most minutes viewed type of content, while things like ebooks, as well as infographics, more written-based content, even white papers, tend to be more close to the 5 to 10 minute range, while webinars, rich media content, obviously depending on the length, is more along the lines of 20 to 60 plus minutes.
Yeah. All right, so, and this is the content publishing. This is the content planning section. Why don't you talk us through about what's important on that first impression? What do people look for when you're going to get them to either register or engage in a piece of content?
Yeah, of course. So we were just talking about kind of how you start planning the type of content you want to create that resonates with their audience. At this point, you've settled on the type of content you want to create, whether it's a panel, it's a webinar, it's a video, it's a talk. And so now you need to make sure that not only are you've determined your strategy, but now you're starting to translate that into, actionable insights and content. And so I think one of the goals that we find is essential with creating content that resonates with our audience is being really authentic, and really being very straightforward with the type of content that you're creating. So what you're seeing here in this data point is what is the feature of the webinar that a audience member looks at first when they're going to register a review. And so, not surprising, just like any headline for any newspaper article, right? The headline and the webinar title is the most important. And so what we find is that, especially with webinar titles, it's important that, yes, you want to be catchy and really draw their attention, but they need to understand what the presentation and the talk or the content is going to be about. So we find that the webinar title is crucial, and you need to be clear, concise, and catchy in order to really ensure that people are signing up and know what they're signing up for, and you grab their attention. I don't often recommend that you sacrifice the clarity and the being concise in order to be clever. I find being clear and concise is always better. In addition to that, once you've kind of got their attention, they understand what the presentation or content is going to be about. The abstract is crucial. This is where you really convince the audience that they should register for your content. What we find to be the most crucial in this aspect is that not only is it a little bit less salesy, so but just very straightforward and very clear on what the audience will learn by attending. You can do that by being very clear on using bullet points, by really being forthcoming on what you're going to cover. Don't hide the fact that it's going to be a demo. If you're going to go through the platform, explain that. I think the worst thing you can do is position your content as thought leadership and to really present a demo instead, because ultimately you're ruining that authentic connection, and you're not creating a good first impression. And so the top two, title and abstract, I think is pretty obvious. I think the other part that's really interesting is the source of content. Now, the source of content really comes down to kind of your authority. And so, with brand names, this comes a little bit easier with people, with vendors and companies, organizations that don't have as much brand awareness. They need to leverage some external thought leaders, and we found this to be an interest of our audience as well, to help build up their authority. But whether you're using your brand or even the presenter and who the presenter is, make sure that if you're presenting content that's technical and not be necessarily the salesperson speaking, but having a combination of a technical person as well as salesperson really matters. And so the source of content is crucial, and why someone would choose to register for a piece of content going forward.
Right. So, okay. So this was, you asked the audience, what's important to you to register and engage in a piece of content. It's always interesting to see the presenter kind of in the middle of that list or further down the list, because I think people put a lot of time and effort into trying to get like the perfect speaker or going after this kind of influencer audience, when it really is about the story you're going to tell and the story you do tell. And that brings us to the next question that you asked around really, once they've engaged with the content, what recommendations would you make to vendors to improve the quality or the experience? And this is the data, right?
Yeah, exactly. So again, when you're crafting your descriptions, your titles, you want to be authentic, and that was exactly what our professionals told us. So the first thing they recommended for vendors is to curb the sales messages. I think professionals know that they're going to be sold to when they're attending this content. In general, I think that if you're going to do that, and it's going to be a demo, great. Just have that in the abstract. I think the key here is that your goal is to build authentic connection and to teach them. You're trying to build trust with your audience. If they want to go and purchase your product, they will go and research your content, and we'll dig into that a little bit later. But you don't need to be selling all the time. You're trying to build thought leadership with them so that when they are ready to buy, you're the first person they think of to go and solve their problem, because they've been viewing your content in a series, in virtual events, in webinars, videos, etc., and they've been using you as a learning source. So I think it's really key to really think about yes, you want to be driving leads down your funnel. You want to be getting as many touches as possible, increase your lead scores, but you want to be careful to not break your audience's trust by being inauthentic. But in addition to that, what I also think is really interesting is the using more data and research. What we're doing now is a perfect example. People want original research and exclusive research. It really adds an interesting perspective, because it's exclusive. You're the only one that has that research and content, and it's a unique perspective that you're providing that no one else can provide. And so using more data and research, whether it's from your own platform, your own data, I think is really important and something that you can do more of. And then finally, I think that is another big piece I think is really interesting is these thought leader and analysts. A lot of our clients use analyst firms to go and create content to provide that thought leadership. That's absolutely great. You provide a level of authority. Thinking back to the source of the content, you provide a level of authority. But there's also third-party experts. There's industry experts. There's a lot of opportunity for you to work with and create content, not just with analysts, which can be a little expensive at times, but also work with industry experts, bloggers, people who are putting out their content that is pushing forward the industry, and associate your brand with them. This is something that we do often when we create panels. We'll create panels for our clients where we'll source industry experts and then have our clients participate. And we're finding that there is a massive amount of appetite to do that, because it really diversifies the type of content you're creating.
Yeah. So Nick, we've got one more slide before we transition to distribution. I think we're okay on time, although I will move it along. The 4% at the bottom of this slide said other, and it allowed for a write-in, allowed them to offer recommendations on a write-in basis. So the team just pulled that out, kind of organized the data, tried to, it's free text write-ins. So they were just trying to make sure that they pulled out the top items on the do's and the don'ts. And again, this presentation is downloadable, so I'm not going to ask Nick to run through each of these together, but I will use the second to keep this on the screen and ask Nick one or two questions here. So, there's a question here. I'm trying to figure out the best way to ask this of you, but it's what kind of behavior are we striving to influence? How do you correlate and measure the impact that behavior can have on decision making? And there was a data point that we did not include in this, Nick, but maybe you've got some insight you can lead. That data point was around how the use of webinars or videos were impacting purchase decisions, right?
Yes. So I think it really depends. I think when you are creating content to influence, ultimately the goal is to influence someone to buy your product, right? But I think, that I think is for every marketer is the ultimate goal. But in addition to that, you can have certain secondary and tertiary goals around, you want, again, it's all about building this connection and relationship with your audience. And so you make sure that they trust you in terms of understanding and that you're teaching them. And so, because ultimately what we found in referencing the data point, what we found is that professionals typically view, about half our professionals on BrightTALK typically view about 3 to 4 pieces of content and during their research process for when they are about to purchase to make a purchasing decision. And so, thinking that you're going to spend all this time on creating one demo that will convert all of your leads just isn't the behavior we're seeing. We're seeing that our professionals and users want to view multiple pieces of content from vendors. They want to, it's similar to a relationship. They want to be courted a little bit and learn from you, why, understand that you have the technical expertise that's important for them to solve their business issues, but also that you're providing different layers as they're getting ready to buy. And so, the influencers, so what you're trying to influence is really that behavior and that purchasing decision, but you're trying to do things earlier, creating that relationship, and so that they keep coming back to you to keep learning from you.
Yeah. There was another question that I'll just quickly answer. It was, despite the number of attendees, are customers finding that shifting to virtual events translate into a comparable level of SQLs? Leading the marketing team, MQLs, SQLs, SALs, close one deals is definitely in our demand waterfall, what we measure all the time. I'd say it's not, I would say the right balance is to have all of these levers in your strategy. So virtual events or summits, collection-based, themed-based, multi-day events are one strategy that we use and we use successfully. They are actually the number one performance strategy, likely by way of volume. And then doing kind of single-based talks or series-based talks, as we're doing today here, would be next. And then there's intent-based products around webinars and videos that we use highly successfully as well. So we see a very general comparison around the conversion, as long as your business and your commercial teams, your sales development, sales teams are aware of these various different strategies and know how to follow up and work different types of leads where they may be engaging within themes or topics, they may be engaging within your content. And over the coming weeks, we have a new series that we just kicked off last week that will be addressing these on the various different types of products that BrightTALK offers. So I encourage you to attend those. Nick, let's move into distribution. We are running slightly behind now, but we can get through this. And let's start talking a little bit about scheduling and really the sweet spot of maximizing promotional benefits. You know this stuff very well.
Yeah, absolutely. So, we're going to go deeper into the email promotions in the report, but I wanted to cover a little bit about what we typically see in terms of the lead up to the live date and the amount of registrations we typically see. So, depending on when you create your content, we often recommend that you're creating content at least 30 days before the live date. And what you're seeing here is the lead up by week. And so what we found is that, if by scheduling content early, you're going to get some early attendees, and you're going to get some people signing up. But as you get closer to the date, what we are typically finding is that we're getting more and more conversions, not surprising, as there's more urgency as the live date comes and approaches. And so what we found is that 20% of your audience comes in about 21 weeks, give or take. And as you lead up, it's important that you're promoting, you're not waiting to promote your content, week out, 2 weeks out, but we actually found that some of the best times to promote I think we sent about 32 million emails last year. Actually, 100 million emails last year. What what we found is that, promoting early gets this date and gets people to register a little bit higher, at a higher registration rate than if you promote closer to the live date. But you'll actually see a bigger number of users start registering. I think it's important to know that while you are promoting early, about a month out, what we find is that there's a sweet spot in that if you promote too early, say 4 weeks out, some people might register, but they probably won't actually attend the content. A month out is a long time. And so we find that there's a sweet spot that, start promoting, you're scheduling content 4 to 5 weeks out so you can get some organic audience and in registrations, but start really promoting once about 4 weeks out, and then continue doing your promotions 3 to 1 weeks out so that you're really driving and maximizing the efficacy of those promotions.
Yeah. I think this is excellent guidance on a general framework for your promotional schedule. I will say that we have found in our most recent series that needs to be topical because of the current conditions, that we've had the top performing talk in a 10-year period come with 48 hours of promotion. As well as there was a recent talk on BrightTALK that had 25,000 registrations and 14,000 live viewers that kind of came out of nowhere. So this is great guidance, and I would definitely hang this up on the wall as a general guideline for your team on the promotional schedule. But let's also don't lose sight that if you can put a series together and be topical in the content that you're producing, you can have amazing effects in very short durations as well. Now, Nick, one of the things the platform's capable of, which is very unique to BrightTALK and any really webinar platform out there, is that it's embeddable on websites. So not only is all the content that we analyzed, it was content that was on BrightTALK, but that content also very much exists off BrightTALK on these vendor websites, right? And what data points did you guys find in analyzing the embeddable content?
Yeah, so I think it's really interesting. And this goes back to really ensuring that you're providing an experience that encourages your audience to continue researching and learning. And so by embedding your content and by providing resources around your content, you're really going to be able to maximize conversion rates. Because what we found is that when you embed your content on your site, you get a much higher completion rate, meaning that the amount of content that is viewed. So if a webinar is an hour long, professionals are going to be viewing more than half that content on average, compared to about 30% of that content, both live and recorded. So this is both statuses. So people are viewing more content when it's embedded. They're also spending more time viewing that content. Users spend 71 minutes viewing content on average versus 38 minutes hosted on a different site. But in addition to that, it's also the interactions within your content and what your audience members are doing. We're finding them, rate more often. We're finding them download more attachments, and they're asking more questions. You create all this content that is meant to be engaging, interactive, and so it's important that you're not only maximizing on this type of engagement behavior that we're seeing, but you're also making it really easy for your audience to go from viewing your webinar, being like, oh, that's a great piece of content, I just learned a lot, and then have them go search content around you. Now, the BrightTALK platform allows you to have attachments, but by embedding it, you really keep your audience on your page, extend the amount of time on page, and also make it really easy for them to move from your webinar to white paper to contact us form. And so, you really want to make sure that by embedding, you're tapping into that behavior and really getting the most out of your audience so that you should really shorten that time, the length of time it takes to close that opportunity.
Yeah. This is one of my favorite parts of BrightTALK, the embeddable nature. I can tell you, there was a question that came in, like, what's the most popular recent webinar or talk that you'd recommend that we watch? And again, there's a link to the Flip the Switch series. The first one was 6 weeks ago. It had over 2,000 or nearly 2,000 registrations, and I think it's up on nearly 6,000 viewings. It was called Flip the Switch, Building a Virtual Event in 24 Hours. And because it was embedded on the BrightTALK marketing pages where we had live chat or demo request form, we essentially 4x'd our inbound demand just through hosting that content on our website and having those call to actions right near it. So huge fan of this. Answer 2 questions there. Just tell us a little bit about Ada, Nick, because if anybody wants to distribute content on BrightTALK, understanding how our AI technology works is key to getting it distributed across and really reaching your ideal buyer.
Yeah, absolutely. So, so Ada is our machine learning AI powered algorithm that allows us to recommend content based off the previous behavior of our users, as well as who our users are by their job title, level, country, etc. And so it's a recommendation tool. When you create content and post on BrightTALK or you syndicate content onto BrightTALK, you immediately get access to Ada, whose job is to really ensure that she is driving relevant content to relevant users. And so we do that through a few different ways. Weekly recommendation emails that we send, our feeds on the site, as well as our direct email promotions through our in-house email tool, promotes all of this content based off these algorithms. It's really crucial that you're sending content that is relevant to our audience at the right time when they're ready. And so by tapping into Ada, it allows our clients to access our audiences and really ensure that they are getting the most engaged leads that are most relevant for them. And so I want to talk. Oh. Yeah.
You there?
Yes.
Okay. Sorry, thought we lost you there. Anything else on Ada?
No, I'll go in a little bit deeper into how Ada works in a second.
Okay, got it. Yeah.
And so with Ada, this relates back to kind of the publishing time. We highly recommend that you publish content 4 to 5 weeks out. The reason why we recommend you do that, we might send out promotion 3 to 4 weeks out, as we do with our best practices. But part of it is that you get time on the site for your content, for Ada to promote your content through our feeds. And what we find is that on average, you get anywhere between 10 to 20% of your audience coming from Ada through these feeds. And so by immediately getting some audience, you get just organic free traffic. You get some additional registrations that you wouldn't have got just from promotions, and you start seeing people actually start searching and viewing this content. And so what you see here is how Ada works. We send out emails that are automated at different times of the week. But that publishing time and having the content on the site for so long before your webinar goes live is crucial. Because what we find is that the run up to upcoming content, you tend to get more registrations, more views, and more attendees for content that's upcoming versus content that's just only recorded. And so you get higher promotion rates, you get better conversion rates, and you get just more overall audience. This is why we also recommend you leverage features like replay to take your existing content on demand and record it and replay that's upcoming. And so, so Ada really taps into this type of behavior and is optimized to ensure that we're driving as much relevant content or as much relevant audience to you based off of the type of content you're creating and the tags that you're using.
Got it. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of Ada. We put an audience package in, Nick, at like the beginning of March. It was for 6,000 leads, and I think it's almost complete. So it's just unbelievable how the AI machine has really kind of delivered on our audience programs. Look, we've got 4 more data points and about 6 or 7 minutes. So I'm just going to move us through these last points because they are important and they will address some of the questions that have already come in. And if we have a few extra seconds, we'll ask these questions of Nick as well. So just tell us a little bit about what the professionals value around viewing content, Nick.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is a trend we've been seeing year over year, is that professionals would rather view the recording when they rather the flexibility to view the content when they're ready than necessarily attend the live presentation. They do want to get the value of the content, of course, and there is value in the live presentation. I'm not saying that there isn't, but people are busy, and not everyone can make an hour-long window. And the amount of time the content can be recorded is vastly longer than the time it's going to be live. And so it's not surprising that we see that our audiences really prefer to make sure that the recording's viewable anytime, that there's additional resources, and that they can watch it when they're ready. And so you need to make sure that you have that flexibility when you're creating this type of content. Otherwise, you're going to miss out on a massive amount of audience, which we'll go into a little bit. And so just a few things here, just real quickly. Doesn't mean that the live presentation isn't important. People like the value of asking live questions, as many of you are doing right now. There is a significant amount of value getting your questions answered. But really, you need to make sure that your content is accessible, when they are ready to view that content.
And then the interactivity. Marketers always love the interactivity, being able to feed that through our connectors so we can really inform our commercial teams on how people are engaging. Tell us a little bit about what you found in the survey and in the platform data around how people are engaging.
Yeah, absolutely. So when we say interactions, this means the questions, the votes, the attachments, et cetera, right? Activity and interactions you can do with the content and outside of just viewing or registering for the content. And so what we found is that there were slight differences between job levels, depending on what they're more likely to do in type of interaction. So for example, we find that for the most part, VPs and C-levels are least likely to ask questions. We find that practitioner managers tend to ask more questions. Attachments across the board are crucial for all job levels. Everyone wants additional resources. It doesn't matter really what it is. It could be links to your website. It can be white papers. It can be PDFs, data sheets, infographics, LinkedIn profiles, whatever it is. But people want additional resources. We also find that some more practitioner managers tend to rate more. But the really interesting part, which I don't see many marketers use as much, is the votes. But we find that actually a higher level professionals, VPs and C-levels, are more likely to participate in votes than any other interaction compared to the other job levels. So as you're planning out your content and you're planning out the how you're going to run your webinar presentation, you should try and leverage all of these so that you can ensure that you're providing a really interactive experience for your audience. And ensuring that you engage them across all job levels.
Yeah. There's a few questions coming in. We're going to answer these questions through the next 2 data points that we have left. So Nick, let's just talk a little bit about the significance of engagement on demand.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think one of the most interesting data points we came across this year was that you receive about 50% of your audience from registrations, and you receive the additional 50% from the live viewing and recorded viewings. And so on average, I believe we saw about 50% come from live, but really you get an additional, I say it's roughly about 30% coming from the recorded version. And so what you're seeing here is the amount of weeks over time, you will continually get more users, especially in the first few weeks of the content being recorded. Now, this does plateau, and there is a certain point of time where it will start to decrease pretty significantly. But I think there's an opportunity for you to really tap into this behavior and ensure and this is why not only providing flexibility is important, but also the attachments so that people can continue doing research and viewing more content. And so this is a pretty crucial aspect because again, our users want that flexibility more than anything. And you need to ensure that your content is available pretty much immediately on demand, but definitely by the next day. That was by far the biggest jump in attendance and recording, and that goes throughout the next 12 to 15 weeks.
Yeah, and somebody had written in saying, look, I keep getting interrupted. I'm going to have to watch this on demand so I can really concentrate on the material. We're fortunate the BrightTALK platform will make this available immediately on demand. So for the person that put that question through, as well as everyone else, this will be available for you to review again. And then last, there was another question, Nick, and it was talking about the success and impact of live webinars versus pre-recorded. So as we look at not only the performance of how replays have had, maybe you can just talk a little bit about how we also view or what are our thoughts on the use of replays?
Absolutely. So when we say replays, we're talking about taking your existing piece of content and replaying it as if it is live, and ideally with some kind of live aspect to it. So what we often recommend is that our clients, you're going to reach a plateau with the amount of audience you're seeing at a certain period. When you do that, you should replay your content as if it's upcoming in live, but then also have a live Q&A aspect so you can answer these questions that for example, that we're receiving. we don't actually see a massive difference in terms of the engagement pattern for replay content versus original content, because you could be promoting to existing audience or new audiences that you haven't had when you first ran the content. It's just a really fresh way to take existing relevant pieces of content that aren't outdated and reuse them in a new way, and also still have that live component of answering questions at the very end and doing all of that. And so, what we found is that about a quarter of the content we on BrightTALK last year was replays, but our marketers got a significant amount of additional value out of that content. I believe they got on average about 50 more attendees to the content, from an average of about, I say, 120 or so. So that's almost 50% increase. I think it's about 40%, give or take. 40% increase of additional attendees to their content just by replaying it. It's a really powerful tool, and it really ensures that you extend the shelf life of your content and really get the most out of the content you spent so much time to create.
Yeah. Okay, Nick, we are up on the hour. I'm going to have to call it. There is a slide here where we just wanted to summarize some of the different high points throughout planning, distribution, and performance. Again, this content is available on demand. You can download the presentation in the attachments as well. And we will have some guides coming out that will expand on this story, that will bring through more copy as well, so you can take your time and read through it over your weekend time or something. And we'll also be verticalizing some of this content as well. So, Nick, in closing, any thoughts that you want to share with the audience?
No, I think there's a lot of really great data in here. I highly recommend that you dig into it. Feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any additional questions. We'll try and follow up as much as we can. But yeah, there's a lot of great data here, and there's a lot of ways that you can create content that really resonates with your audience by really tapping into their behaviors and what they're looking for. And so as long as you do that, I think you can really create content that will drive, not only drive engagement, but will really drive your pipeline and improve conversions.
I would definitely take him up on that, connecting on LinkedIn. So on behalf of Nick, I'm Dave Pitta. Thank you to BrightTALK, and thank you, everybody, for joining us. Make it a great day.